My Amish husband kept one drawer locked for 38 years. I opened it. After his funeral, the last buggy left just after dark. I heard it, the slow creak of wheels on gravel, the sound fading until there was nothing left but the wind against the kitchen window. The women had cleaned everything before they went. The dishes, the floor, the long table where we had laid him out that morning. They had even washed the cloth. I stood in the middle of the room and I could smell the food they'd brought. Bread, something with apples, and I couldn't eat any of it. Across the room, the drawer was still locked. My name is Sarah, and this is Amish Aunt, where I share the stories from my life that I spent a long time too quiet to tell. If something here reaches you, I hope you'll subscribe and stay close. And I'd love to know, have you ever kept a silence out of love? Tell me below. I didn't cry that night. I want to say that plainly, not because I'm ashamed of it, but because I think it matters to the story. I had cried earlier at the graveside, quietly into the collar of my black dress, while the bishop spoke words I had heard said over other people and never imagined being said over him. But by the time the house emptied and the lamp was the only warm thing left in the kitchen, the crying had stopped. I was just standing there still, noticing things. His boots were by the door where he always left them, slightly turned out, the left one more worn than the right. I had never noticed that before. 41 years, and I had never noticed that. The desk was in the corner where it had always been. It was a small writing desk, dark wood, scarred along one edge from a move we made when our youngest was 3. He had brought it into our marriage from his father's house. It was one of the few things that had been purely his, not ours, his. And in the lower left drawer there was a lock, a small brass lock, the kind that takes a narrow key. I had known about it since the first winter of our marriage, since 1986, when I was 19 years old and still learning the sound the house made at night, still learning the weight of what I had stepped into on our wedding day. I had made a decision, the moment they carried him out, that I would open it before the week was over. What I did not know was what opening it would cost me. I didn't know that yet. So I stood in the kitchen and I looked at the desk from across the room and I thought about the morning, 38 years ago when I first asked him about it. We had been married perhaps 6 weeks. I was straightening the room. I was always straightening something in those first months, always looking for a way to be useful, and I touched the lock and felt that it wouldn't give. I turned and asked him simply, "What's in here?" He looked up from where he was sitting. He said, "That is mine, not unkind, not cold, just final," and I had accepted that. I want you to understand how I had accepted that. Not from fear, not from some crushed place inside me, but from the shape that Gelassenheit had given to my love. Yielding. That is the word we were raised with. Yielding to God's order, to the community's order, to the order inside a home. I was not a woman without a voice. I had opinions. I spoke them. I was not small, but I had been taught, we all had, that there are rooms inside another person that belong to God before they belong to you, and I had believed that. I had built my marriage on believing that. For 38 years, I had not touched the lock. What I can tell you now is that our marriage was real. That matters to me, and I need to say it before I say anything else. It was not a performance. It was not a silence dressed up as peace. He was a good man in the ways that Amish men of his generation understood goodness. He worked hard. He was faithful to the community. He was present at the table. He was gentle with our children in his quiet way. While not cruel, he was private. There is a difference, and I knew the difference, and I chose him knowing that difference. 38 years of early mornings and difficult winters and small mercies and the kind of love that stops announcing itself and just is. Steady, unremarkable really came close to the drawer twice. The first time, our eldest son Daniel was sick, genuinely sick, the kind of sick that sits in a mother's chest and doesn't leave. My husband had traveled to Ohio for a community matter, gone for 8 days, and I was alone in the house with a boy who burned with fever through 3 nights running. On the 4th night, when Daniel finally slept, and I was sitting in the kitchen at 2 a.m. with nothing to do but wait and be afraid, I thought about the drawer. I stood up. I walked to the desk. I put my hand on the lock, and then I didn't. I went back to the chair. I told myself it was faith. I still think it was partly. Partly it was something else, something I didn't have a name for then. The second time was harder to set aside. It was perhaps 12 years into our marriage. I was helping him with his coat. It was early spring, still cold, the kind of cold that stays in the wood of the walls, and something fell from his inside pocket. A piece of paper, folded 3 times into a small square. I picked it up, and before I thought to stop myself, I opened it. Not fully, enough to see one line. The handwriting was not his. It was narrow and careful, the letters pressed hard into the page, and the one line I saw before I folded it back, before I pressed it into his hand without a word. That one line stayed with me for 26 more years. I will tell you what it said, but not yet, because to understand what it meant, you need to understand what came before it. There was an ordinary morning I think about often, from somewhere in the middle of our years, when the children were still home and the farm was full of noise. He was at the writing desk back to me, writing something I couldn't see. The morning light came through the east window the way it only does in September, gold and low and brief. The children were outside. I could hear them. I brought him his coffee and set it beside him, and he said, "Thank you," without turning around. I stood there for just a moment, a breath, no more, looking at the back of his head, the set of his shoulders, the way his hand moved across the page. I did not look at what he was writing. I went back to the kitchen. I had done that 1,000 mornings. I only remember that one. I don't remember deciding to. One moment I was standing in the kitchen doorway, and the next I was sitting at the desk with the lamp pulled close and the key between my fingers. The wood of the chair was cold through my dress. The house was completely still, the kind of still that only comes after many people have left a place, when the air hasn't settled yet from all the movement and grief. I put the key in the lock. It fit. Of course it fit. I had known it would. I had found it in the small tin box with his cufflinks and his father's pocket watch. I turned it. The lock gave with a sound so small I almost didn't hear it. Then I just sat there, my hand on the drawer, not pulling it open yet. I thought of a woman I had known from a neighboring district. I will not use her name. She deserves that privacy. We had been close in the way that Amish women sometimes become close, through work and proximity and the particular understanding that passes between people who live inside the same rules. Her husband died 3 winters before mine, and afterward, she told me quietly one afternoon, we were quilting, our hands busy, because hard things are easier when your hands are busy, that she had found. Letters tucked inside the back cover of his Bible. Not love letters, she said, something else entirely. Something that asked her to hold 2 versions of him at once. I remember thinking I could not do that. I remember being grateful I would never have to. I pulled the drawer open. The smell came first, cedar and something older underneath it, old paper, dry and faintly sweet, the way documents get when they have been kept a long time in a closed space. The drawer was not full. That was the first thing I noticed. It was not stuffed with secrets. There were a few things arranged with care. A small amount of money, folded bills, not a large sum, a map worn soft at the folds of a part of Pennsylvania I recognized but had never visited, a dried flower, brown and pressed flat. I didn't know what kind it had been. A child's drawing, crayon on plain paper, a house with a yellow sun. I looked at these things for a long moment, and then beneath them 3 photographs. The photographs were small, the old kind, slightly faded at the edges. The people in them were plainly dressed. A woman, perhaps 40, perhaps a little younger, and 2 children beside her. Boy and a girl. They were standing outside what looked like a modest house. Nothing remarkable about it. I did not recognize any of them. The woman in the photographs was not looking at the camera. She was looking slightly to the side, and there was something in her expression, not unhappy exactly, but careful, watchful, the kind of face a person makes when they have learned to take nothing for granted. I turned the photographs over. On the back of one, in my husband's handwriting, was a year, 1979, 7 years before we married. Beneath the photographs was a letter, several letters, I realized, folded together, the same narrow, careful handwriting I had seen on that piece of paper from his coat pocket 26 years before. I sat very still then. I read them slowly in the order they were dated, beginning in 1984 and ending in 2019. They were not love letters. I want to be clear about that. Not because it changes everything, but because it changes enough. They were correspondence. Careful, practical, grateful letters. She wrote about the children's schooling, about a roof that needed repair, about a winter that had been harder than the last. And tucked between two of the letters, the one thing that told me everything, was a record of small amounts of money sent regularly, quietly, for 35 years. Her name was in the letters, and beside her name, in one of the earlier ones, a single line that explained the photographs, the map, the 35 years of quiet giving. She had been shunned from his home community before I ever knew him, cast out at 19, with a young child and nowhere certain to go, for reasons the letter didn't explain, and I understood I was not owed. He had grown up beside her. They had known each other as children know each other in Amish communities, completely quietly, the way you know someone when you share a table and a faith and a road for your entire childhood. And when the community cut her off, he had not. Not loudly, not in a way anyone could see, but steadily for the rest of his life in the only space he could find to do it. If you have stayed with me this far, I need you to tell me something. What I'm about to say is the part I almost didn't say out loud. It is the part that changed what I think love looks like. If this story is reaching something in you, please subscribe to Amish Ant and stay close to this channel, because I am still working out what all of this means, and I find I don't want to work it out alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you're carrying. I read everyone. He kept this from me. That is true, and I have sat with the hurt of it, and I will not rush past it or dress it up as something easier than it was. I deserve to know. I think sometimes that he knew I deserved to know, and kept it anyway, not from coldness, but from the particular shape that fear takes inside a man who has been taught that mercy must be invisible to be safe. I put the photographs back. I folded the letters carefully, the way they had been folded before. I set the map on top, and the dried flower, and the child's drawing with the yellow sun. I set the key on the stack, not inside the lock, just resting there on top of everything in plain sight. Then I left the room. I made myself a cup of tea, and for the first time since they had carried him out that morning, I talked to him. Out loud, alone in the kitchen, the way you talk to someone when there is nothing left to lose by being honest. I said, I see you, and I think, finally, I understood that he had spent 38 years hoping, in his quiet and imperfect way, that one day I would.